here we go again.
Boom, here we go again.
Can you believe episode 6 already? Wow.
6 already? Damn.
I know, racing through them. And
How fucking good are we at this, man?
I don't know about that, but we're definitely getting the hang of it, I have to say.
That's good, man. Hey everyone, welcome back to the 40k Fireside podcast. We're here with episode 6. I'm here with Vic. We're back at it. I'm back from holiday. I'm playing Warhammer 40k in London. I'm having a good time, thinking about the game as well. So we've got some great stuff to share with you guys today. We're going to be chatting, we're going to be breaking the podcast into two sections this time. So the first section, we're going to be talking about the meta, straight into it. Insights into the meta after a few weeks of the balanced data slate. What's the game looking like right now after things have been updated? And how this ties into the meta of UKTC versus the GW terrain, or US Open. We've just had a big Kansas City event there, so we'll be discussing about that. And we're going to be providing some insight and advice into how to think about event results and how much you should be taking into account event results if you're, say, going to your local meta or you're going to your local RTT. How do you prepare for your local meta in light of recent results around the world? Then in section B, we're going to be talking about the Coventry Super-Major. This is the event this weekend that Vic and I are both attending. Our teammates are attending that as well. It's a 3-day Super-Major, and then there's also a 2-day side major event there as well. So we're going to be going to that, and we'll be also talking about 4 lists that we've got that we're going to analyze and take a look at. That's from Alex Harrison, Nassim Fouchain, Mike Porter, and Anthony Vanella. So we'll be chatting about what we like about those lists and whether we expect them to do well. Then we're going to be talking about our own lists, kind of what we're bringing to Coventry as well, and some of the key practice games that we've had. And after that, who do we think is going to take it all? So if you're liking the sound of that, join us for the first part, which we're going to get cracking into right now with none other than my main man, Vic VJ. How's it going, man?
Hey, Dave. Welcome back to all the listeners for episode number 6. Can you believe we have whizzed through to number 6, Dave? Wasn't that crazy?
It's crazy, yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think when we did the first episode, just to put it in context, to listeners, that the first episode was a little bit of stop and starting, but I think we've kind of got the groove now. We're learning how to do all the back end side of things, and then how to kind of improve our podcast bit by bit. And we've still had a lot of great feedback from people, and we really appreciate that. If you're dropping a comment or you're just saying to something us in Discord, like, hey, this is great, I'd love to see more of this. We do actually listen to all of that, and we really try and incorporate it. There's a bit of planning before each episode that Vic and I really try and work on things every time. So hopefully that's coming through as well.
For sure. And this time we've tried to incorporate a little bit of feedback. We received a great kind of almost an essay from Zach, who organizes the UKTC events, about ways of improving this and making this podcast more valuable. So we're going to try and kind of share some takeaway points with you guys who are listening that you can use to kind of improve yourself as competitive players. So yeah. I hope you find that interesting. We received some good feedback from our teammate Malik as well. So we're going to try and keep things really nice and clean and smooth, just like he likes it. So without further ado, let's get some jazz music on and swing over to section A.
That wraps up part 1. We hope you're enjoying listening, and we'll be back shortly with part 2. Right, Vic, so it's been, how long has it been since the last balanced data slate update? A month, maybe? A couple of weeks?
Are we on a couple of weeks, I think?
And this was the one where we talked about in the previous episode when I was in France, chatting about the pretty significant nerfs to Leviathan Tyranids, which I think was definitely coming through this weekend. And then some changes to Necrons and Harlequins as well. So in light of this, what do you think the meta is, and this is a tough question, but do you think the meta is better now in terms of its competitiveness and its balance than it was before the balanced data slate?
So our predictions from the previous episode were, I said that it's going to be pretty much roughly the same. And I think your predictions were that it was actually going to get worse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still on the train that it's roughly the same. There's a little bit of swinging around. Like, for example, you might not see as many Leviathan Nids or Light Harlequins, but realistically, the Harlequin faction and the Tyrion faction are still at a very similar power level to where they are before, minus maybe the tiniest bit, just knocks them down a little bit, but I still think it keeps them as very strong armies. And because the balanced data slate was so light in its touch, I feel like it's just a slight adjustment of armies and not very many armies getting adjusted. So, my opinion, I think we're still roughly where we were before the balanced data slate. Your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, well, I think time will tell as well. I think what was interesting in Kansas is that there was no Turners in the top four, right? So I haven't looked at it yet, but I'd be interested to see the Turner win rates after the Coventry Super-Major as well. So we'll have 2 weeks of kind of big events that we'll see what's happened with that faction in specific, which is interesting as well because I think Kraken is still really strong, and I think that's Kraken is still a tier 1 army as well. Notably, I'm not playing it because I wanted a bit of a change. But yeah, I think the meta is it's becoming a little bit hot, if you know what I'm saying. There's there's one unit which is becoming more and more popular, which is the Flamer. So we'll have to see kind of how dominant the Flamer is, and just how many lists kind of incorporate it. We're talking about the Zinch Flamer, of course, as well. But I think that's the only thing, that particular nail, that I think a lot of people will want to hammer in for the meta as it currently stands. What do you think on that?
For sure, I think Flamers stand out as potentially the most broken unit in the game at the moment, and I think it's going to get a lot of attention as people start to kind of identify the armies where they can just add in 18 Flamers.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of drama last time about talking about adding Flamers into Emperor's Children, and that's pretty much been curbed completely by most TOs have decided to rule against that, which is great.
Which is great, yeah.
But there's still going to be armies like Creations of Bile and Thousand Suns who are going to get a lot from adding Flamers into their army, and Chaos Demons from adding Flamers into their army. I think the meta as it stands at the moment, from just this last weekend, so we're working on very limited data and not UK events. We're working almost entirely on America events, which is a big point we're going to be kind of discussing. It looks like Chaos Demons came out as the strongest faction statistically, and that's not even including factions kind of souping in demons. So my statistics that I've got in front of me is that there were there were 11 armies which had Flamers, which were X and 1 in tournaments from this last weekend, 32 plus player tournaments. The next highest was 7 with Necrons, so quite a big jump. So yeah, the Flamers are definitely carrying a lot of the power in the meta at the moment.
It's definitely a very prevalent unit, and I think every time, at any point in time in Warhammer 40k, there is always a unit where people kind of gravitate to, and their thinking revolves around when considering their army and their army choices. And I think Flamers is just that one that's currently at the top of the list, along with Chaos Space Marines, Terminators as well. I think that's definitely a profile that people are thinking a lot about. So those two things, considering how you can attack them and defend against them. Flamers are definitely an interesting one, because I think actually Flamers are such a dynamic unit that when considering how your army tackles Flamers, it's not only the defensive profile or the offensive profile, but it's also the movement phase as well, right? So if you have fast units you can tag Flamers, then actually that can almost completely nullify them. So not only do you got to think about offense and defense, but actually how can you tag them? So all three parts of that data sheet are causing people to think, which I think is a good thing overall, right? Like you want something to be like that.
I think so. The issues with the Flamers, like you said, are in multiple phases here. They're a unit which can inherently deep strike. They're a 12-inch moving infantry model, and their output is extremely pushed. But all of this is pushed because the models are 25 points per model. For Flamers, just simply being an infantry unit that can move 12 inches and has Flamers on them would be very strong. Let's say they all had heavy Flamers, just D6, strength 5, -1 damage Flamers. That would be a strong unit, a strong unit in pretty much any army. But they're AP -2. They have inherent deep strike. They have lots of buffs which you can put on the Flamers, and they come with a 3+ invuln against shooting and 3 wounds base. They're really, really pushed. But The interesting thing is there are ways of dealing with these very strong units, both the Chaos Terminators and also the Flamers. And I don't know, have you? I guess you've played with the Flamers. Have you found any good strategies to deal with them as well?
Yeah, because I think I'm playing Be'lakor, which enables me to teleport flamers out of combat, and that's one of the biggest strengths of playing demons in Be'lakor. Some armies can't actually teleport the flamers out of combat once you tag them up, so that's a good way of tackling them as well. On the flamer note, I think people do tend to play them on the board as well. They don't deep strike them very often at all, because actually deep striking them makes them a lot less proactive than you would think. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, you want to sort of stage them on turn one and then have 12 plus d6 movement and then additional 12 inch on top of that. So you can actually get into the real juice of the army if they let you. So those are kind of the ways of tackling them. Yeah, flamers are definitely good. They're good and problematic slash not problematic in a lot of different armies. I think in demons as mono demons, they are a necessary evil, because I don't actually think, because demons have some serious weaknesses, and obviously shooting is a massive component of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of covers that flaw for demons. Whereas if you soup them into an army like Thousand Suns, they don't cover a weakness that previously existed per se. They only enhance an army, which is really powerful. And Thousand Suns can do a lot of mortals to pull out their flamers out of combat, which is an interesting way to play around it as well. So
I would say though that when there's a unit that's particularly strong like this, let's say the Flamers, let's focus on
mhm.
those. You can almost assume when you go to a tournament, particularly immediately after changes like this, immediately after Flamers become a very prevalent part, like a discussion, you can assume you're going to be playing against a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they're a unit that is very susceptible to getting tagged,
Mhm.
getting killed in melee. If you can turn off their Overwatch, it's quite powerful. So for example, in my list, which we'll discuss further and that I'm taking to Coventry, I have multiple sources of Ignore Overwatch
Mhm.
from Howling Banshees and Exarch Power and my Swooping Hawks. I have multiple fast melee units that can go and reach the Flamers.
Mhm.
So I think we all just have to be looking for ways to kind of tackle units that are like this.
Mhm.
And you saw in the GW Kansas event that the Blood Angels player that played against Manny's, Flamers, and T-Suns in the finals, he had a Whirlwind in his list.
Mm.
And the Whirlwind was for a stratagem to allow Overwatch to be ignored
Yep.
on a unit that the Whirlwind targets. That is such a clutch, clever kind of meta choice to make.
Mhm.
And I think for list building for tournaments, if you want to just like tweak whatever army you have, just to add in tools to deal with things like Flamers, I think that's a really strong way to build your army lists
Yeah,
for
definitely.
competitive events.
Yep, and that's we'll talk about that in part two as well when we're talking about what we are expecting and kind of some of the lists as well. But talking about flamers, Vic, what are your top three armies in the game right now?
So, and I think this ties into us talking about UKTC versus GW
Mhm.
terrain, because I'd say the two strongest armies, probably the three, my opinion is that Tau are right up there. And I think Tau are on a very similar level to Thousand Suns and Flamers.
Mhm.
And I think Creations of Bile and Flamers and Emperor's Children, those like the Chaos Space Marine armies,
Yeah.
are also right up there in that top three for me
Yep.
at the moment. But saying that in UKTC, I think Flamers become even stronger. I think
Really?
Tau becomes even
Mm.
stronger compared to GW terrain.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. What do you
I
think?
think the flamers is an interesting one because on UKTC there's pros and cons. There's a little bit less dense, obscuring terrain in the midfield, so there's less staging. And I think flamers are particularly strong if you can stage them as well. In fact, I think that's where they really shine. So it's interesting. I would agree that I think, oh, it's tough. So I think the top armies, the top three, if I had to pick three, one on UKTC playing would be, I'm assuming Thousand Suns and Flamers has to be up there in the top three in no particular order because they could all, at the end of the day, win an event. I'm Super-Major. Thousand Suns and Flamers. I think Tau's up there as well. And then for me, it's a tie between Chaos Space Marines and Tyranids as well. I think that Kraken Tyranids are actually very, very, very strong right now. And actually are, after this weekend, I think they're going to go a little bit under the radar.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I think you're right. And I'm seeing a lot more of these kind of mortal wound spammy Tyranid lists as well,
Mhm.
which I know are very strong. But yeah, the Kraken variant is extremely strong, and actually, I would argue that Kraken and Twilight Harlequins, those two, are extremely good on the kind of Games Workshop US Open
Oh yeah.
terrain. Because of the reach of melee units. That's kind of the defining factor. Fast-moving shooting units are very good on UKTC and
Mhm.
WTC terrain, and fast-moving melee units are very good on Games Workshop terrain.
Mm.
That's why armies like Sisters of Battle get stuck in the middle.
Mm.
Despite having good secondaries, they're vulnerable to fast-moving shooting units, which makes them a bit compromised on UKTC terrain.
Yep.
And they don't quite have the movement to bridge the gap between the large terrain pieces and deployment zones
Definitely.
in the US Open terrain. So I think a big part of why we're seeing Sisters potentially struggle a little bit.
So, in light of what an interesting point I think is that we've just named what we think, I guess, the top four, 3 to 5 factions, and Blood Angel's not in there. So, I think this goes on well into our next point: is how do you analyze event results when, say, you live in the United States and you see, UK events or WTC events, or you live in the UK and you see US based events? How do you take into account your list, and then how much weight should you put on these events in general? Now, I think when when I think about what I think about when I should reevaluate my army, or should I be making serious changes to my army, the big movers for me are the balanced data slate, or a particular archetype that's been invented. From event to event, I don't necessarily change my army depending on how an event in the United States performed, or like SoCal or Bay Open or something like that, or what might have won that, or something in Europe, because at the end of the day, it is substantially different. For me, it's more of a mental note of saying, okay, that's interesting, like they're doing their thing. Okay, that's cool. But I think a great example of this is that I played Leviathan Nids for 6 months maybe, and my list was the same. For the most part, like 1,700 points. But what I did was I changed that 200, 300 points. I flexed that and optimized that between my events, just based on what I thought was going to come into the meta. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I think event results are heavily kind of created by two significant factors which go under the radar and beyond just faction choice,
Mm-hmm.
which makes the statistics hard to follow for particular regions. And one is the terrain setup.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably the single biggest thing which influences the meta and what is actually winning tournaments.
Mm.
And the second one is the kind of very successful competitive players in that particular meta.
Mm.
So, there's a lot of times, for example, you can take Innes using GSC at the moment, and he's going to come to great success with GSC, but that doesn't necessarily mean GSC is a top faction.
Mm-hmm.
And just seeing him win a major doesn't necessarily mean that GSC are the best faction in the game.
Mm.
It's really tough to analyze, and I think this last weekend was a good example of that. For example, Emperor's Children, absolutely nothing in any podiums.
Mm-hmm.
But we know Empress Children is very strong, and we know Empress Children is considerably stronger on UKTC terrain
Mm-hmm.
than it is on Games Workshop Open terrain. So that would probably be my kind of key takeaway when it comes to analyzing event results. Focus on your own region and the terrain setups that you're going to be kind of playing in, and like Dave does, just keep like a little eye on the side for, but potentially some innovations that come from other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But just take them with a pinch of salt, because Jack Harpster's Twilight Harlequin list, very, very powerful on Games Workshop Open terrain, but you are going to have serious issues hiding those big bricks of Harlequin troops on UKTC terrain.
Mm.
And that level of analysis is not always talked about, and I really haven't heard any other podcast kind of discussing it.
Yeah.
So
There's a certain element of, I think we've all experienced this at some point, when you come up against a player and they're playing maybe something suboptimal, right? Maybe you think it's suboptimal, and you go, "Oh, that's a bit weird. He's playing this," but that player is confident, and they go, "Okay, you might think this is suboptimal, but I've got X game plan that I'm trying to accomplish, and I know it's strong because I'm either like an adept player at the game, or I've had the reps in." There's something to respect about people that do that, and I think that's ties in well into how to analyze events too. If your army is executing a strong game plan, then at the end of the day, you're probably playing a strong army. And then I think the real decisions you need to consider are, okay, what are you expecting to, lose against? Okay, how can you change the last, 100 points to hedge a little bit towards that? This is something that I do a lot. I go, okay, I've got my core kind of list, that bulk 90% of it. And then I go, okay, I'm really kind of worried about Tau, for example, or maybe Eldar. How do I move those last 100 points where I can actually just have specific units for very specific circumstances? So, can I have a fast unit to clear 2 screens on turn 1 if I go second versus Eldar or Tau, for example, as well? So I can clear 2 screens with 1 cheap unit and then execute the rest of my game plan. And that unit might not be very good against other matchups, but I'm making a very direct decision to tailor against those armies because of A, either the people that I know are going to go there, or B, because I know that the army's becoming more popular in light of recent events in my region. And I guess I just touched on it. An important point too is understanding the players in your region is ultimately a very large contributing factor as well. And I'm assuming that not everyone may be as networked as Vic and I to understand kind of in real time what other players are thinking, but that's an important thing to do. So maybe if you're really trying to gun for it, look at players that are going to be potentially attending, and then see maybe what they've previously played. And then if you think there's a good chance that you'll play them in very deep into the tournament, just have a little couple of tech pieces there, because all of that definitely happens in the UK, right, Vic?
Oh, 100%. And I mean, I think when we discuss our lists, like
Mm.
I know we both added in tech pieces to deal with the meta that we're likely to be experiencing. And hopefully, our viewers will be able to take some inspiration from some of those ideas.
Definitely.
And I think that leads us on nicely, Dave, into kind of moving on to our next section, which is talking about the massive 3-day Coventry Super-Major, which is coming up in next weekend.
There we go. We'll catch you guys in section B. We'll be covering the Coventry Super-Major, our lists, some lists to look out for, and who we'd put our money on at the end of the day. Catch you guys then. And that concludes part 2. We hope you're enjoying the Fireside, and we'll see you momentarily for part 3.
Welcome back to our second section for 40k Fireside. We're going to be talking about the Coventry Super-Major, and we're going to jump straight into picking out a few lists that we think are either very strong or very interesting. And I wanted to jump straight in and talk about Harlequins. Because Harlequins have been consistently one of the best performing armies in the game since their release, regardless of multiple nerfs. And they've just taken another set of nerfs, particularly to the light sub-faction.
Yep.
And the particular part of it is that essentially the troops inside of boats can't advance with their transport and fire their pistols, which doesn't sound like a lot, but actually it adds up to a significant decrease in the output of the army over a long range.
Yep.
So before, they used to kind of move the boat 22 inches and then shoot the fusion pistol 6 inches, the newer pistols 12 inches. That particular tactic doesn't work so well off moving 16 inches because it's very easy to stay 22 inches away from one of those boats. It's very hard to stay 28 inches away from those boats on UKTC terrain.
For sure.
So the first list, and actually the first 2 lists I want to pick out, I'm going to pick out Mike Porter's list because particularly I think Mike Porter is one of the best players in the world and one of the best players in the UK.
And plays Eldari a lot. Plays Harlequins for quite a long time, right?
Yeah, he does jump through a number of different factions, but he's been playing Harlequins recently. I mean, he's on. I was checking kind of the CRS that if you go on stat-check.com, you can see people's ELO or CRS rating, which gives you their win-loss and their rankings. And Mike, I think, is on a single loss for this entire season and like 30 plus wins, and he's got a huge number of those with Harlequins. He is still playing light for this event, which I find quite interesting, and still taking kind of the 8 boats and 8 troop choices with 2 Neuro Disruptors and 2 Fusion Pistols in each troop squad. And that's pretty much the same kind of list we see before.
So what's going on here, Vic? Did Mike not read the balanced data slate? I'm sure that he did. But I'm going to call you out here because I remember in the previous episode, you
Yeah.
said that Twilight was really going to be shown as the up and comer after this, and I kind of said, but actually, I feel like Light, the Starweaver, they just still their shooting is just seems still so reliable. What's going on here?
Potentially, you might be right there. That I think light is still incredibly strong, and I think we've probably prematurely decided that it's kind of dead
Mm,
when actually, still being able to advance with kind of your actual star weavers and shooting is probably quite strong still. So, I'd be really interested to see how Mike does during this
mhm,
event with this list. He's got a lot of experience with it, but will the reduction in threat range, will the reduction in overall shooting output make a significant impact?
mm.
Or does he just play the mission still very strongly and just carry on with his life as normal? I think that's one that we definitely want to keep an eye on.
But you've got a
Before we move,
Twilight list
oh
as
yeah,
well, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Before we move on to the next list, I just wanted to kind of lightly touch on a Twilight list, which is at the 3-day event,
Hmm.
which is from Dylan Usher, who I think plays a lot of TTS.
Yeah, he
He does
does.
come to a number of events.
Is
Dylan's
Dylan
an
Usher?
excellent
Hold up a
player.
second. Is he a UK
Hmm.
person?
He is a UK
Oh
person.
man, I'm sure I've chatted to
Yeah.
him before, but man, oh,
Yeah, I'm sure you've played him
I
as
probably
well.
have.
He's
Yeah,
on a lot of the tactical
yeah, yeah.
tortoise events and
So he's
videos.
bringing Twilight, huh? How does this? If you don't know anything about Harlequins, which I pretty much don't, how does this
Mm.
differ from Eight Boats, couple of characters?
So Twilight, so it doesn't
Hmm.
is the first thing.
Okay,
It still plays off of he has 7 boats.
okay.
Yes, seven boats, and still all minimum squads of Harlequin troops.
Mm,
Still playing with a couple of Skyweavers and the usual kind of couple of Shadow Seers and a Troopmaster.
mm,
He's got a Death Jester as well. So the way the Twilight differs is that it's a little bit more punchy. You get +1 attack, and you also get a stratagem which is 1 CP, and your sixes to hit auto wound,
mm.
which really ups the
Yeah.
output of your troop units. So he's gone for, compared to Light, where you don't take many weapons on your Harlequin troop squads, he's gone for full weapons on all of these Harlequin troop
Mm,
squads. He's still got 2 fusion pistols and 2 neuro disruptors, so he's still got a little bit of shooting, and now that's at the same range as playing it with Light.
mm,
And importantly, when you consolidate or pile in Twilight, you get +2 inches to that.
that's nice.
In the UKTC FAQ, they've ruled that there's a stratagem for Harlequins in general, where when an enemy unit falls back from you, you can pile in and follow them.
Right.
Now, normally that's 3 inches of pile-in. And I'd say some TOs would rule that the +2 inches from Twilight don't add to
Mm,
it, but in UKTC it does.
hmm.
So you're following someone 5 inches
And
after they
there's quite
fall
a few
back using that
5 inch
stratagem.
movement platforms, right? Like Chaos Space Marines are basically
Oh,
all 5 inch, right?
sorry. Cross that out.
Okay.
That stratagem allows you to consolidate 6 inches.
Oh, right.
So it's 8 inches with Twilight
Right.
at this event.
Cool.
So that's huge.
So you can
That's
chase
really
you can chase everything in demons. You can chase everything in Tyranids as well. You can chase a good amount of Necrons there as well, right?
for sure. And with 12-inch moving units, it's very easy to really limit the direction that units can
Yeah.
go to escape that.
Yep.
And they may not even be able to escape it at all. So very, very strong. And I think that one stratagem and that one trick makes me feel like Twilight is incredibly powerful.
It's definitely pretty
Um,
potent where in games at the top level where if you make a single kind of blunder, you can get shut out of the game. That's definitely a super good tool to have in your back pocket, isn't it?
Yeah, because the way I've seen it being used before is when you're trying to take an objective back from a Harlequin unit that's tagged you in combat, and you fall back out of it trying to shoot that unit off the objective.
Mm.
If you mess that up and you get tagged again, which is
If
very
you just
hard to escape
missequence
now
it.
at Twilight,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't shoot them, and then it's very difficult to then put an OBSEC unit on there and take it away from the Harlequin troops, which is
Yeah.
huge swing in often game-ending swings in primary.
So if you're a listener right now and you're against Harlequins, especially Twilight, I think it's really important just to have that 3 minute kind of really just think through. Okay, I move this.
Mhm.
He piles in. Where can he go? Okay, and then if I do this one first across this one, he moves in, piles in. Where does he go? And just take the time. Don't be lazy. Really think that out methodically because ultimately it is something that can be outplayed. But obviously, it still has a clear fundamental strength. But it is something that's going to reward you as a player if you just take the time to think about it methodically, consider it through before you just start picking up pieces and moving them.
For sure. Absolutely. So yeah, good luck to Dylan with that very powerful
All right,
Twilight
Dylan, we're
Harlequin
rooting
list.
for you, my boy.
You got
Come on,
this,
bud.
man.
I want to see Dylan versus Mike Porter.
Oh gosh, that'll be
We'll see who
interesting.
comes up on top.
Perfect. Which list are you going to hit up now,
So I
Dave?
think the balanced data slate had a really interesting change for Necrons, right?
Hmm.
Necrons lost the Silent King lost core. So okay, that's interesting. But they kept relentless expansionist, eternal conqueror, so obsec and 6-inch pregame move. So I think, ooh, that really puts the Silent King in an interesting position. Is he worth it? Because his shooting platform has become significantly less reliable. You suddenly don't get to reroll on your menace, which is kind of, he doesn't reroll for himself in combat, which decreases his output quite a bit. So what I thought was interesting, I was looking through the players, and I saw Alex Harrison was submitting a list. So he's playing Necrons, and he played Necrons at LGT, and he had a little bit of a different list. He had a Doom Scythe or a Tomb Blade. Where you can the Necron aircraft and like
Yeah.
20 flayed ones. So he was playing that bomb, and I think he got knocked down in the fifth round or the fourth round. So I thought it'd be interesting. Alex is a great player, extremely skilled. I thought it'd be really interesting to see what his list looked like after it. And then lo and behold, I saw that he wasn't playing Silent King. So he's got 2,000 points of Necrons without the Silent King. So, well, let's see what we get here. In terms of characters, he's gone for the double Chronomancer and then Technomancer and then a Psychomancer. I don't actually know what the Psychomancer does, but okay. The Chronomancer, he's got Veil of Darkness, pretty standard. And then on the other one is just a base Chronomancer. So I think Chronomancer has put 2 5-ups, 5
Hmm.
invulnerables.
That's right.
He's the same unit of Scorpic Destroyers, which is oh no, sorry. He's got 1 unit of Scorpic Destroyers with hype phase, 2 hype phase, Reblades, and 4 Threshers. Okay, it's pretty standard. And then another
Hmm.
unit of Scorpic Destroyers with 1 Reblade, 4 Threshers.
Yeah, that's because it's a
So
unit of 5, isn't it?
yeah, you can only mix them
Hmm.
if you've got a certain number of
Yeah.
them. And then he's got 9 Scarabs, 8 Scarabs, 5 Wraiths, 5 Wraiths, 5 Wraiths, and another unit of Scorpic Destroyers. And his only shooting in this list that I'm just realizing now is he's got 3 Tomb Blades. So actually, this has gone the complete opposite direction from where we previously were with Necrons. The direction being, you'd always have that core unit of Locust Destroyers that you could Veil of
Hmm.
Darkness, and then 4 rerolls to hit, 4 rerolls to wound, and nuke something. So he's actually gone completely away from that. He's gone for the all melee list, similar to the list I lost at the Unconquerable event with 3 units of 5 Wraiths, 3 units of 9 Scarabs. And instead of that big unit of destroyers, he's basically gotten kind of one big unit of. Oh, sorry. Instead of the Silent King, he's basically gotten a 6-man Scorpic Destroyer, a 5-man Scorpic Destroyer, and then 3 Tomb Blades instead of that 400-ish points. Yeah, so he's gone all melee, which is it's an interesting way to play Necrons.
That's
I think it's a bit of a risky one on UKTC, that's for sure, because we know that I know Vic and I both think that the meta is going to get a bit heavy, shooting heavy for a while.
yeah, but is there? I mean, this is thick, man. This is
It's
really
pretty
thick.
thick, yeah.
So 665 Scorpic destroyers,
Yeah.
3 units of 5 rates, 988 Scarab swarms. So this is a huge volume of wounds army.
Mhm.
But you're right. He's impossible to hide everything in this terrain setup.
Flamers are
So
pretty prevalent too, right? This
oh
is
yeah, flamers do a
not
number, don't
it's
they?
not the army I would want to play into 18 flamers. So
Interesting, really interesting.
it's
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Alex does. It's very one-dimensional, but yeah, we'll see.
but having said that, I think Alex would come back and probably say, actually, Scorpic Destroyers are not great into flames either, and actually, Silent King's not amazing into flames either because you just have 3 up and runnable save, right, and it's D3 damage against wound 3,
True.
which is a completely fair point. So perhaps this does well. What do you think this list
Mhm.
does like into Chaos Space Marines?
Oh, I think this list just doubles down on the key strength of Necrons, which is playing their secondaries and the primary.
Hmm.
And the Necron lists that I've been playing against with my Chaos Space Marines, I've noticed that they run out of stuff
Hmm.
by turn 4 or 5. I don't think this runs out of stuff by turn 4 or 5.
Yep.
And I think that might be key to just consistently putting 90 plus scores on the board,
Yeah.
which is what you need. Because if you can just deny a little bit of primary, your opponent is not getting 90 plus.
Mm.
And this is what this list does. It doesn't matter if you get through it in 5 turns. Like if you only get through it at the end of your 5th turn, then it doesn't matter at all. So I think this is going to be extremely strong personally. And, let's see how it does against the Flamers that are going to be at the event. But I have a feeling that Alex is going to take this really far.
We were talking about Anthony Vanella's list at Chaos Space Marines, and Vic, I think that you will be slightly familiar with this list.
Yeah, well, both of us talked to Anthony quite a lot. Yeah. He's our good friend, and we're super excited to kind of actually meet in person. And Anthony is super into his Emperor's Children. He's been playing them at a number of events in America and coming up with great success with them. And Anthony's kind of like we've discussed, and we kind of met in the middle with our lists. And Anthony's taken a bit of inspiration from me. I've taken a bit from him, and he's ended up with a list which is really similar to what I've been running at the previous few events. He's got the kind of the classic Demon Prince. His little difference is here he's running the reroll wounds warlord trait as well as the mantle of traitors for reroll hits and throwing the reroll ones to hit to different units across the board. That change, the Demon Prince is a change in his list. Before he was running a Disco Lord, and the Demon Prince has been something which he's told me he's really enjoyed using to open up some of the psychic secondaries.
Yep.
That's it. And then he's got Dark Apostle, which you usually see with the Trans Hitman ability and the no rerolls, which you can put onto a friendly unit. And then he's got the Master of Possession, who can cast the 3 buffing spells. He's got 1 unit of Cultists and 5 units of Noise Marines, so exactly the same setup as what I used at LGT.
Yep.
And then he's got a Chaos Terminator squad with no Melter in there. And yeah, exactly the same number of Power Fists and Combi Chain Fists as I was using.
I mean, you can't go wrong with it, can you? I mean, this list is still really strong, right?
He's got a Venom Crawler, which is the same as me. So everything is the same up to this point now, where he changed my second Venom Crawler into a Chaos Spawn. That's 25 points. And the other 80 points goes into the key part of his list. He's named his army Execution on BCP, and it is a Master of Executions. So
what does this do?
The Master of Execution. So I did actually run one at the Glasshammer GT.
Okay. So you were the first person to run the Master of Execution, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and Anthony actually had a Rhino in there, and somehow I managed to convince him to swap the Rhino out for this guy, because the Rhino is very tough for Eldar to deal with. So I'm glad he's gone for this. So the Master of Executions has a built-in 6-inch heroic intervention. He's also the biggest beat stick in the army for his points cost. He has a warlord trait called Hatred Incarnate, which lets him reroll all his hit rolls and gives him extra attack and strength. So he's strength 8, -3, 2 damage with 7 attacks. And whenever he rolls a 6 to hit, he does 2 mortal wounds instead of any other damage. So you're going in, fishing for 6s. There's a Slanesh stratagem to make one of your hit rolls into a 6. He consistently puts out 4 to 6 mortal wounds on his target. And with the 6-inch heroic intervention, he controls a lot of space and controls objectives. And he protects you from kind of getting slapped by things by throwing a fight last out just where you need it. So as much as I tease about Anthony dropping the Rhino for this, I think the Master of Executions is a stronger choice than a Rhino in this army. The Rhino gives you a little bit of reach, but it is easier to hide 2 lines of 5 Noise Marines on UKTC terrain in one of your forward ruins than it is to hide a Rhino in that space. Because I have tried the Rhino out, and I wanted to add a Rhino out because I was like, I don't need Possessed if my Noise Marines can move 9 inches out of a Rhino. But it actually doesn't work very well on UKTC terrain at all. And it also awkwardly gives a target to anti-tank guns if you put them forward in any kind of way.
Definitely.
So
one thing I would say about the choice of the Master of Execution is that is a melee beat stick. Is that really the thing that you need?
Completely agree. And I think actually the Master of Execution, the Chaos Spawn being a second Venom Crawler is the stronger build.
Because we believe that the meta is getting, well, we know for a fact that the meta is getting more shooty as well, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I was listening to an Art of War kind of every Tuesday. They do a little chat about the meta, and they were saying that the meta is becoming less shooty, which really confused me. But definitely over here, we're finding that people are leaning into shooting more as it becomes more and more challenging to get melee units across the board safely.
For sure.
And Flamers certainly make it very difficult to get melee units staged in the middle of the board.
But I think one of the largest reasons why the meta is getting more shooty is because of the domination of one of these lists that we're going to talk about now, which is Tau. And
Mm-hmm.
Tau's an interesting one because, unfortunately, the best way to combat Tau is actually to shoot back, which is it's a bit frustrating of an army for that reason, because when you introduce it into the meta when it is strong, it doesn't create dynamic metas. It forces it into its own game plan, which is why it's so strong. So we're going to have a chat about Nassim Fouchain's Tau list, actually, and who he recently came second at the London Grand Tournament. And thought this would be interesting to see how these Tau lists have changed. And I think Nassim Fouchain, Carl Grundy, Brian Sepp, I think his name is as well, who plays for Team Scotland. And also Conrad Bartowicz, is our teammate's brother, is playing, all playing Tau, and their lists are all very similar. So this seems to be where the convergence of Tau minds have come to. I'll run you guys through the list. It's Fireside Enclaves, of course. It's got 2 commanders, 20 Kroot, 5 Kroot hounds, or 4 Kroot hounds, and it's got 3 Fireside marksmen. I'm not sure what they do, but Vic will run me through. It's got 2 Riptides battlesuits. It's got 2 Sunstrike bombers, of course, and then it's got 5 unit of 5 battlesuits with 2 shield drones, and it's got a unit of 3 battlesuits as well. So, what is, as a non-Tau player, it seems interesting that people have moved into Riptide battlesuits. For me, I always thought they were quite reasonably good, but they haven't really shown up that much. And maybe is this a response to the fact that Tau and shooting is becoming more popular? They want to have a more tankier thing. What are your kind of thoughts on this, Vic?
Yeah, so the Riptide battlesuits have 2 major advantages. One is that the Ion Accelerator, which is a 4 damage like big gun, is actually quite effective at killing kind of Terminators, and generally is quite good in the meta, where we're not seeing massive hordes of units at the moment. It also comes with the ability to, one of its Nova Charge reactor abilities is to move in the charge phase. So you can move out, shoot, and then in the charge phase bounce back behind obscuring terrain. So if you have 2 Riptides and 1 big Crisis Suit unit that is using the Stretch and Strike and Fade to shoot and then move again, that gives you 3 powerful units that are kind of shooting and then bouncing back, so not interactive. Commanders also really love Riptide battlesuits and using them to bodyguard themselves, so you can kind of get multiple units that are putting out huge damage output but not really being able to be shot back. So
what are the Fireside marksmen? I don't think I've ever seen those before.
So I think what NASA's done here is he's really had to trim his list down so that he's able to take 2 Crisis Suit units and 2 Riptides. Normally, you'd have to pick 3 of those things and take them. And what he's done is he's dropped a commander here. And by dropping a commander, he only has 2 characters that he can take warlord traits on. So he's essentially looked for one of the cheaper characters that he can take so that he can take his 3rd warlord trait. In this case, the Fireside Marksman is a character and has the redeploy warlord trait, Exemplar of the Kauyon. The Fireside Marksman's interesting. He's like a mini Shadow Sun, Commander Shadow Sun, because he can't be targeted from outside 12 inches. So it's quite nice to put on to an objective and just help you control your primary. Because another thing NASA's done here is really cut down his chaff. He has 2 units of 10 Kroot, and then he has a single unit of Kroot Hounds. So he's working on really minimal chaff here. And I think that is probably the underlying weakness of the list. And I've noticed that with Tau a lot. Kill their crew, kill their chaff, and they have to put important things on the objectives. And I love what he's done by taking a Fireside Marksman to try and work his way around that a little bit.
Give you another unit there. We'll try and thicken up the list with other things. Yeah, it's interesting. Sure. I think, like I was saying before, is that the meta has become more and more shooty because of lists such as this have become a lot more prevalent in the UK. And we'll jump straight onto we'll jump on soon to what our lists are. But I think what that's kind of been the largest changing factor, I think, in the last month and a half to 2 months, right, Vic, is that the prevalence of these Tau lists have become ever so more popular. And that in Chaos Space Marines, really, kind of they took over the meta from, I guess, Tyranid domination, where, actually Amelia was quite good against Tyranids to some degree, or Mortal Wounds were. And then actually the meta has just shifted into being able to attack opponents while not being in combat with them.
Oh, for sure, definitely. And, I think this Tau list is probably one of the strongest lists in the game at the moment. So
What makes it?
good luck.
Why is it
Oh
so
yeah.
potent? Do you think? What really?
I I think it sits perfectly in the meta because it's able to kill the heavy tanky stuff like the Chaos Terminators running into the middle.
Mm,
They will die to this Tau list even when buffed.
mm,
Um, and it also kills like the little sneaky things like Sisters or Eldar that are trying to hide behind ruins because the Sunshark Bombers are probably one of the best units in the game.
mm-hmm,
The amount of output and reach that they have is unparalleled in the game.
mm-hmm.
And I think the Sunshark Bombers alone remove so many of the bad matchups for Tau.
Yeah,
Um, saying that, I think Tau still have a couple of awkward games. They're not beyond beating. They're not
definitely
broken
not.
necessarily. And a couple of the armies which they struggle against, say like Harlequins being directly on top of them, that's a really tough game.
Mm,
And Demons with their invulnerable saves, particularly on the Zinj things against shooting, can be really tough for Tau to chew through.
mm-hmm.
And both of those armies are very strong in the meta.
Definitely. Very strong in the meta. We will see on the demon one. That's a great segue. Let's chat about what did we bring? I think I've been stewing over for a little bit what I've going to take. I think the last episode I was really, oh man, I think we were both to be fair, I think we were sitting on the fence on what we were actually going to end up on, weren't we?
Oh, 100, yeah, for sure. And I think both of us had a sensible choice, which was you going for Kraken
Yep.
Nids and me going for Emperor's Children.
Mm-hmm.
And both of us decided against the sensible choice.
The proven, as in, and when you say sensible choice, you mean, and this is potentially for a viewer as well, if you're thinking about tournaments, repeatable experience, right? Like known kind of results, walking into something in your comfort zone was something that you know is strong. We both kind of went against that. So what were your reasons for taking Eldar?
Yeah, so I did end up switching to my Eldar list. I love Eldar. I'd say that's my base camp of the kind of aesthetic and lore and models that I love, and the playstyle as well. You know how happy I was during the time when Hail of Doom was really
Oh
good.
yeah.
So yeah, I love that, and to be able to find a strong build again in Eldar has made me really happy. And I've settled on a combination of Swift Strikes, which allows you to advance and then count as remaining stationary. It's very powerful for both battle focusing and battle. Some units battle focus really well, like Swooping Hawks, which can completely redeploy. So being able to advance, shoot, and then redeploy your Swooping Hawks is extremely powerful. But it also really helps heavy weapons. Being able to advance and shoot scatter lasers really opens up a lot of output from units that are not commonly seen,
Yeah,
like
definitely.
Shroud Runners.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I settled on it because I think the combination of Swift Strikes and Ignore Cover on AP0 weaponry is very powerful into particularly CSM.
Mm-hmm. And
And then
Tau, though, right?
yeah, okay, they do have a little bit of 2+ save, but
Mm.
we have access to Jinx for -1 save.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's Strength 6 breakpoint on Scatter Lasers, for example.
Great.
Very good into Tau Flyers, very good into suits,
Yep.
and incredibly good into kind of clearing chaff like Kroot.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, so I
Run me
think it
through.
has a wide. Yeah.
I was going to say, run me through your list from top to bottom before we get into
Shall we
further.
do it?
Go for it, of course.
Okay. Let me get it up in front of me so that I don't miss anything. Because
any of the spots.
I think a lot of people will be interested in this kind of Eldar concept because I think Craftworld Eldar have been really suffering for a while now.
But hey, before you get up your list, and I'm going to go and talk about something. It's very interesting how a meta evolves, and how some things that were in a previous meta suboptimal suddenly become good because of other armies that have become good. Previously, Vic would never have submitted this if Harpies were in the meta. If I think if there were more than if there was more than one popular army with Harpies, with aircraft, sorry, I don't think you would have submitted this. And what I mean by that is, if there were Sunshark Bombers and Harpies being prevalent in the top tables, I don't think you would have gone for this, because this list does suffer versus aircraft as well, right?
Yeah, it suffers versus aircraft and indirect fire.
Yeah. But now that
at the moment,
gone,
there's definitely hope for it.
Yeah.
And the list is built into 2 detachments, an Outrider and a Patrol detachment. The Outrider detachment has Baharoth, 2 units of 5 Howling Banshees. One of them has Mirror Swords and Piercing Strikes. The other one has Crone Scream and Nerve Shredding Shriek. So one is a 2 damage 10 attack unit. The other one has all the mortal wounds coming out of it. There's 26 Swooping Hawks in that detachment, 10, 10, 6. There's 3 units of single Vipers. There's in the patrol detachment, there's 5 rangers, 10 dire avengers with shredding fire, 5 striking scorpions with biting blade and crushing blow, and 2 units of 3 shroud runners. There's also a whole range of psychers. I have 2 Farseer Skyrunners on jet bikes. One has Doom Executioner, the other one has Guide Focus Will. And then we have a unit of 3 Warlock Skyrunners in a Seer Council.
Mm-hmm.
They have Quicken Restrain and Enhance and Drain, which is a +1 to hit, -1 to hit.
Yep.
And then a single Warlock Skyrunner on a jet bike with Protect Chinks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is the whole list, but there's a huge amount of detail to unpack in the list. And I'm not going to do absolutely
Go
everything.
through some highlights.
Unpack a couple of highlights.
In fact, in terms of what we've been talking about recently, in terms of ticking towards lists, let's pick out 3 or 4 highlights and why exactly you've chosen.
Sure. So I have 3 particular tech pieces in here that are suited to the meta.
Mm-hmm.
The first tech piece is that I personally... Oh, no, actually, I've got 4 big tech pieces here. So the first big tech piece is that I wanted to have something to deal with Thousand Sons and Flamers because I personally rate them as the best army in the game. Now, interestingly, I think there are zero Thousand Sons and Flamers at this event, which is incredible to me, but it is what it is because AP 0 shooting, 1 damage shooting, is extremely poor into Thousand Sons. Even the Rubric Marines, even if you ignore their cover, they still get a 2+ save against it. So in order to account for that, I have a unit of 10 Dire Avengers with Shredding Fire, which triggers off their AP -4 wounds on a 5+ rather than a 6+.
Nice.
If you do Doom, Guide, and Jinx on a unit of Scarab Occult Terminators, on average you kill about 8 with Blade Storm.
From 10 Dire Avengers?
Yep, exactly, with Guide and Blade Storm. So it's huge output.
Wow.
So that's an absolute tech piece against Thousand Sun Scarab Occult Terminators. I know, right? Second tech piece is dealing with Flamers. I have 2 units of 5 Howling Banshees in this list. Both of them can ignore Overwatch. And the way I've set it up is one of the units has the 2 damage hits with 10 attacks, and the other one has an Executioner, which is a 2 damage weapon. And that girl has 5 attacks. I modified my list so that I was able to take 3 Warlock powers, and I've added an Enhance and Drain into this list. When you put +1 to hit onto the Howling Banshees, they're just about able to kill 4 or 5 Flamers.
Yep.
Which is a big difference to a test game that we had where I was struggling to do any damage to the Flamers. But the +1 to hit is the key breakpoint for all of this. Third tech piece is dealing with Sunshock Bombers. So the way I've set up my Swooping Hawks is one of the units of Swooping Hawks has one of the Shrine Relics, which is called the Phoenix Plume. As long as the Exarch's alive, the unit has a 5+ Feel No Pain. And then I've also given him an Exarch power. The Exarch power I've given him is called Suppressing Fire. When he hits an enemy unit, you roll 3d6. If you exceed the enemy unit's leadership, you turn off their Overwatch.
Nice.
And they can't do actions, which is powerful into Tau and into Flamers. But importantly, it gives him an extra wound on his profile.
So you can take those models that you're going to be taking from the Sunshine Bombers.
Correct,
basically.
exactly. It's my units of Swooping Hawks are 10-10-6. If I lose first turn, I can just Phantasm the second unit of 10 off the table, and I can just leave him with 1 big unit to put his bombs through. And then I'll take the first set of bombs just on models, normal Swooping Hawks, and the second set of bombs I'll take it on models, but also I'll take 2 mortal wounds on the Exarch, so that minimizes my casualties. And it should be I should still have about 6 left, which is quite nice. Through all of that, through 2 bombs bombing me, so that helps me with that. But the big tech piece that I've added into this list to deal with Tau and also deal with other Eldar lists, because I had a feeling I was discussing Swift Strikes a little bit. People have a tendency to kind of run a similar thing to me sometimes, especially even really good players. So there are a couple of other players with Swift Strikes lists, and the Shroud Runners with Ballistic Skill 2, a scatter laser on each model, and they get a pre-game move, and they can also advance and fire their scatter lasers in this list, means that if I go first against another Eldar player with the same list as me, 3 Shroud Runners with Guide on them, their core, so they can take Guide, will kill 10 Swooping Hawks, even if they put the -1 to hit on them.
Nice.
So, which is brutal in the mirror. And you can't hide from that. They move 16 and then move 22, so they're moving. They're moving with 38 before shooting.
Exactly.
But also because they're strength 6, they're very decent into Sunshark bombers.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a very good chance with 2 units of Shroud Runners to kill a Sunshark bomber,
Mm-hmm.
and them dropping down to a single Sunshark bomber is a massive benefit for me.
Yeah.
If I can't get to the Sunshark bombers because they put them into strategic reserves, I will happily trade the Shroud Runners, for example, in Nassim's list for the Kroot and the Kroot Hounds,
Yep.
and then just let him
Just
put
the screens.
real things on the board. Yeah, and then he's never going to be able to bomb me anyway,
Yep.
and I'm never going to let him get line of sight to the Swooping Hawk. So
Yeah. Nice.
the Shroud Runners are an awesome tech piece for 105 points. Can I say one more tech piece?
Fine.
So this is... The Shroud Runners are a big tech piece for dealing with Chaos Terminators, and I am gonna leave it at that and come back to it after the event on this because I think that's my little secret tech piece, but some people have heard it from me already.
Secret tech piece. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
All the tech. I mean, and that's a great example of looking at A, who is going to turn up, B, what the very popular lists are going to be, 2 weeks from now. So when we're thinking about what our list design is going to be and what we're going to practice. And then C, implementing those specific tech pieces against very specific units in very specific circumstances. Because it's no surprise that Vic and I focus on those games at the end of the tournament where we know, where we believe it's going to be much more likely to face specific circumstances like double Sunshark bomber in games when we can lose, right? So it's good. It's good to have the tech pieces and really understand and get ingrained in your local meta as well.
For sure. And Dave, I know you've got the Chaos Demons. You've got some practice games in. Where are we at? What's your list looking like?
I got the Demons, and I've been having a lot of fun playing them. It's been great playing something different for a change. I must be over 150 games deep on Tyranids as well, so it's nice playing something else. Okay, so I'm happy with what I've come to in the conclusion. I know in our team chat I've been posting a lot of lists, all with the central core theme, but I've hammered out through playtesting things that I do and don't like. So this is the list. I've got a battalion and a patrol. I start on 1 CP. So I've got Bloodthirster with 8 wounds per phase, 5 up, feel no pain, and the relic for +1 damage, and importantly, ignore hit and wound modifiers. So he basically always swings on 2s into 2s, which is great. And then I've got a change caster with the Endless Grimoire, and then I've also got, he's got retain 2 Warpstorm points, and he's also got +1 to wound initially, and then he can learn a spell as well after that every turn, so it's great. And then I've got a Trance Weaver, and I've gone for the 5 up, feel no pain on the Trance Weaver, and I'll come back to that in a second. Then I've got 30 Bloodletters, and I've got 20 Demonettes. I've got 6 Flamers, 6 Flamers, 6 Flamers, and then I've got Be'lakor as well. And on Be'lakor, I'm actually playing Shrouded Steps, so that's the teleport infantry unit. And then I'm playing, I believe it's called Wreathed Shadow. So that is another little tech piece that I've got going as well. But all in all, I think the Demons are reasonably strong. I don't think they're as good, especially on UKTC, as some people seem to be jumping to conclusions about because of this week's previous week's event results. I think Demons apparently went X and 1 maybe the most out of any faction, but I think you'll agree with me here, because it's not actually... X and 1's an interesting statistic, but really at the end of the day, it's who's winning the tournaments. It's who's in the top 4, and I don't think Demons were massively representative. I know in Kansas it was only, I think the top 4, there was 1 Demon player, but he was playing like a Monster Mash list. Or basically it was only like Flamers and Manichimas list. So Demons are in an interesting spot. I think they've still got everything to prove, and I don't think they are as megalomanically strong as the percentage win rate results have really taken them so far.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think you may have got that statistic wrong, because I'm looking at the Meta Monday. So the biggest event had Flamers in 2nd and 3rd and 5th.
Wait. Is this Mono Demons or Flamers in them?
2 of them Chaos Demons, 1 T-Suns and Flamers.
Kansas City.
Yep, that's right, man. The top 5. And then there's the 3rd event, 50 player, 5 round. Chaos Demons won it 5-0.
Okay.
Yeah, there's another one, Chaos Demons 1st, 2nd. So Chaos Demons are...
They're coming
really...
out swinging. All right.
Yeah.
Well, here, and look, this is what we come for, right? Is that, this is how, as we were talking about at the start of the podcast as well, right? How do you analyze event results to your local meta? Do you still think they're strong? Because UKTC, as we've talked about, has become more of a shooting meta, and I think that's clearly that's definitely bad for demons. Demons don't like getting shot off the board. But having said that, I've got a couple of tech pieces there. I chose to run the Bloodthirster with 8 wound phase cap, and the reason I've done that is because, like, against Leagues of Votan, for example, okay, that's fantastic. Against Tyranids, even, he's still really good there. Against Eldar, he's still good. Like, you don't really want to get into combat with him. You're going to get a couple of turns out of him. His big letdown is that he's only one model, so you have to be really precise on where you put him because he's probably going to be there for the rest of the game. But then I've also got on my Changecaster, I ended up going with the Endless Grimoire so that I could learn some psychic powers. Now, there's one psychic power called Infernal Flames? No, Bolt of Change, sorry. Bolt of Change is basically roll 9d6. On a 5-up, you take a mortal, and every model you lose, you take another mortal wound, 18-inch range. So, on average, Vic, that kills, I think, about 7 Swooping Hawks because you suffer 3, and then you suffer 3 more, and then you've got morale.
Does it not need line of sight?
It does need line of sight, though. So
thank God for that.
But there's another thing, though, is that you can 1 CP, you can teleport the Herald as well. So what my game plan here is I've kind of built him into another threat, and that I'm going to learn 2 powers throughout the course of the game, and then be able to teleport him, and then for 1 CP, cast an additional spell. So I get 3 Witchfire out of him. So actually, kind of at the end of the game, it can be a little thing that I can move around the board and soak up some damage. And like, for example, against Harlequins, that's really good for demons because, you roll that against 5 troop dead. So happy with that change that I've made. And then I've ran the Trance Weaver. I've actually gone for the 5-up Feel No Pain. Now, I can only put that on my 20 Demonettes, but I think that's a little bit better than the Exploding Sixes and +1 attack. Primarily because you usually kill what you get into combat with, and surviving afterwards with the 5-up Feel No Pain can be really strong. So if you're -1 to hit from your Warp Storm points, you have a 4-up Invulnerable and 5-up Feel No Pain, it's actually quite difficult to kill Demonettes because it's just 4-up Invulnerable, 5-up Feel No Pain, and it's basically an effective 3-up. And on 10 models. So I've gone with that choice. I've gone to make them a little more tankier, and then I've also gone with the untargetable outside of 12 inches, which I think for UKTC is really powerful for demons because, like we talked about Tau, and even Chaos Space Marines, you need to have something on that outside objective, and if you can have OBSEC there with like Bloodletters or Demonettes and then make them untargetable, then that's really good. You won't get shot off the board so much.
Yeah, that sounds really good. And I think a big thing I noticed in practice games against Chaos Demons is that they really punish any kind of little mistakes that players make. And I think in the hands of a very good player, Chaos Demons are going to be very strong. But inversely, I think a very good player who understands kind of how to screen and movement and everything properly can also make it difficult for Chaos Demons.
Yep.
So yeah, I think Chaos Demons is a very balanced, very interesting army, and I'm excited to see how you get on, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on the nose there. We've had a couple of practice games. We had a great practice game last night. Actually, I played against Liam VSL, who is the Team Belgium player who kind of brought the list for Thousand Suns and Flamers, probably the best player in the world in that. Ended up losing 71-78. It was a really good game though, and it was really close. Definitely some things I could have done differently, but I think Liam and I both said after the, playing in a practice game against demons is one thing when you haven't got a pressure of the clock and whatnot like that, but to replicate that under clock conditions when there's pressure and you've played a lot of games is a whole nother beast entirely. So I'm hoping that the demons are going to perform a little bit better in real life and when people are under pressure. And I know that for a fact that even myself, you tend to make mistakes when you're under pressure and what like that. And demons are an army where they've got quite a few tricks, right? They're kind of Gene Stealer cultish in that way. They've got a lot going on. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to ride some of those player mistakes to a win.
100%. And I also had a couple of nice little practice games. I played against Francois from Canned Hammer. If you guys have not listened to that podcast, it's really, really good. And Francois is so lovely. He wins multiple GTs. He is currently playing with Kraken Tyranids, and he tried that against my Swift Strikes Eldar. He was really patient with me as I was trying to get to grips with playing TTS and 26 Swooping Hawks using a trackpad. But we ended up with a really close game, which I just about scraped for a win on 92-87. I learned to respect the movement of Raveners, especially when Tyranids get to go first, because there is literally nowhere to hide. So
No.
it was a good discussion point, and he helped me kind of work out which units are best for me to throw away on that first turn. Ultimately, though, he did end up giving me too many of his resources in the mid game, and he ended the game with not enough units to be able to control the primary, and I managed to catch up right at the end.
And that's how the list kind of operates, though, right? You kind of
Yeah,
whittle down,
hide,
whittle
kill,
people
win.
down, and then when the swooping hawks can shoot and then be more aggressive afterwards, you really put the pressure home, don't you?
Yeah, you have to be really patient. Turn 4 and 5 is when you try and win the game.
Yep.
But to get there, A, you need to have enough time on the clock, which is something I'm going to really struggle with. And B, you need to really be on the ball with kind of your game plan. Otherwise, you're just going to miss the opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And but I mean, that's the sign of a great list, right? Those are the types of lists and the type of Warhammer that we want to see play. Not autopilot stuff. So I think we've both got great lists. I think, what do you think, just to close it off, if you had to put money on one faction winning, we won't go players this time, one faction winning, what would you put it on?
My pick, I think the safest pick from an odds perspective relative to faction strength, and I think that's going to be Tau for me.
Okay.
I think there's a very high chance that Tau wins this event.
I think Mike Porter might win this event.
Oh gosh, can you imagine?
I can feel
be
it, man.
Really good.
Mike's missed it. If anything, Mike is extremely consistent.
He is a very good player.
Yeah, so I think Mike's got a good shot, and you know what I'm hoping? I'm hoping Mike can take out some of these Tau and some of these Harlequins for me, and then Mr. Demon can make a few moves in there.
I was hoping you would take out the Tau for me, and I was hoping everyone would take out the Tau for me. But when I said, "Can you imagine?" about Mike, it's not that can you imagine Mike winning a major, because Mike is insanely good. What I meant is, can you imagine light Harlequins after this nerf winning a super major?
Yep.
Can you imagine the chaos on the internet?
Yeah, exactly right. But we'll have to see, and only time will tell. We've got the event this weekend. I'm even playing a practice game tonight against Dino from Netherlands, I believe. He'll correct me. But lovely guy who we met at LGT as well. So more practice for me and Demons. I'm getting more and more reps in, and I'm feeling more and more comfortable with the list as well. And it's fun. And those charges, they're not 9 inches. There's some, they're 5s, they're 6s, sometimes they're even 3s. So it's a little bit more consistent than I'd imagined as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
As always, guys, hit us up with a like, subscribe, drop a comment, and your questions, and your thoughts about what we said about the meta. It'd be really interested to hear what you have to think as well. And thank you for joining us for this one, and see you at the next 40k Fireside.
Thank you for listening to the 40k Fireside podcast. Vic and I hope you've enjoyed listening, and we greatly appreciate any feedback that you can provide after the show.